The Horned Frogs are 1-0, which is an improvement over 2023. We're going to talk tonight on the show about how TCU overcame some mistakes to get to 1-0 on the road, late night West Coast game against Stanford. We're going to break down that game for you. We're going to break down some of Sonny Dykes' midweek presser comments about Long Island, the upcoming opponent for TCU. Marcel Brooks had some fun things to say, and it's generally just been a really good start to the athletic calendar for TCU, so we're going to break all that down right now on the Frogs Insider Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome into Frogs Insider, presented by the Flying T Club. Jamie Plunkett here alongside Melissa Treebwasser, your hosts. As always, Melissa, the Horned Frogs are 1-0.
We are
1-0. The reality of the thing is that we're riding high this week.
Yeah.
It's a good week. The Frogs are undefeated. A lot of teams can't say the same thing. Florida State looking at you. Tough scenes out there. Florida State. Almost Texas Tech as well. What are you doing? Messing around with Abilene Christian like that. Come on now, Red Raiders. But anywho, TCU is 1-0. We're going to break down everything that we saw from that game, how TCU managed to overcome some sloppy mistakes, what that might mean about this year's version of the Horned Frogs. But first, Melissa, got to give a shout out to the folks who run the podcast business here. That is the Flying T Club, our presenting sponsor. Very, very thankful for their partnership. If you don't know, the Flying T Club is a 501c3 nonprofit, also the NIL collective for TCU, the NIL collective, because it is the only NIL collective. Many have tried. Flying T has succeeded. And I think the reason that they have succeeded is because they do two things incredibly well. First, they take care of the student athletes at TCU. That is their main priority, obviously, as a collective. They do an incredible job with that. They have over 110 student athletes currently signed to the organization. And then the second thing that I think really sets them apart is the work that they do in the community around Fort Worth, the organizations that they partner with. This is how they've maintained their nonprofit status, is because of the work they do in the community with organizations in and around Fort Worth. A lot of really, really good work goes into that. They partner those organizations with student athletes. And it's just a really cool kind of community effort to support both the TCU student athletes and the city of Fort Worth. You can go over to theflyingtclub.com, check out all the great work they're doing, participate however you'd like in their efforts as well to support student athletes, and tell them that the Frogs Insider folks, Jamie and Melissa, sent you over there because they'd love to hear from you. And also a big thanks, as always, to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network, a network of podcasts that has a show for every D1 football program in the state of Texas. If you subscribe wherever you get your shows to the Republic of Football Network, you will get a podcast for for all 13 D1 programs. It's pretty cool. It's us. It's the tech guys over at Gambling Gauchos. It's Between Two Bears for Baylor. There's a Texas podcast. There's an A&M podcast, but also UTSA and UTEP and Sam Houston State and Rice. And it's just a really fun network of folks. We're in a online dynasty in CFB 25 right now with a bunch of the folks in this network. I'm getting my ass handed to me more often than not. Melissa, our game is coming up at some point. We keep saying at some point.
We're the finale. I looked. We're the finale of the season. You and I finished. Yeah. So this podcast is a little short tonight because I have a game to play after we record. But
yes.
Yeah, Jamie and I are the end of the season, the last regular season game. So we will be building up to something great.
Maybe we should. Terrible. So we've got some fun stuff coming up that isn't fully set in stone yet, so I'm not going to talk about it, but maybe at one of those fun things.
Have PS5
Interesting.
will travel.
Intriguing. More details to come.
Speaking of intriguing.
Yes.
Heavy on the tree.
On the tree, because we got some lumberjack frogs.
Yeah.
Lumberjack frogs went out to
Stanford.
the West Coast. Listen, I think going back and reflecting on our conversations about Stanford before the game, that in a way we were really both right. Mm-hmm. Because you stood 10 toes down on this, very, very committed to the concept that Stanford would keep this close, that it would be that it would be uncomfortable for TCU fans along the way, but that they would eventually come out on top. I did not think
that.
You did. I did not think it would be close. And I thought that was because really, truly, Stanford had inferior talent and inferior depth to TCU. I think we're both right. And I think the game was close because first game jitters, A lot of mental errors and sloppiness from TCU. 6 15-yard penalties. 3 dropped passes officially, although it felt like 4 or 5 at least. Some real challenges at times for both sides of the ball for TCU. And I think that one of the ways that we know that this team is different than last year, though, as I lose my train of thought mid-sentence, is the fact that we saw similar issues last year, and TCU lost those football games. And now we saw TCU overcome those and win a football game. And I wonder if there's something in that where maybe down the road, some of the same mistakes don't happen. TCU plays a little cleaner. Teams that shouldn't hang with TCU don't hang with TCU. And that this is really just kind of the start of what could be a really positive football season for the Horned Frogs.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, I thought what Ashton Daniels did against TCU, especially in the first half, running the football, breaking contain, making the off-schedule plays and turning them into big plays, has me shaking in my boots for the KJ Jefferson experience here in a couple weeks. But we aren't there yet.
We're not there
yet. I do think that we're not there yet, but that is an issue to me. I will also say that the third quarter was a defensive masterclass.
24 yards allowed, I believe.
Yeah, 1 first down, 24 yards allowed. Just flying to the football, hats on ball every single snap. Just an unbelievable performance we have not seen from a TCU defense in quite a while against the team that had some offensive success in the first half and also happens to have a potential All-American at wide receiver and another guy who has a chance to be an all-conference player in Tiger Bachmeier. So Travis Broughton, who was not expected to be the starter, not only started that game but locked down Alec Aomenor in a way that not many people have been able to do, and he had a lot of help as well. The pressure that the defensive front was consistently putting on. The reason Ashton Daniels was so successful with his legs is because he had to rely on them so often. I mean, there were a couple of designed runs, but he also was running for his life. And that Stanford offensive line is not going to be the best one TCU sees, but they're not abhorrently bad. I was super impressed with what they did that third quarter, and to see it after the last couple of years, to see a TCU defense come in and make halftime adjustments and be successful was a breath of fresh air. The last point I want to make on that, too, is one of the things Sonny Dykes said today in his press conference is going back and watching the footage, as frustrated as he is with those 15-yard penalties, the mental mistakes, he said that when he watched the game back, he actually felt a little bit better. He went so far as to say he thought the game was officiated soft. That he thought that the PI they let the defense and the wide receivers play. He loved the way that was officiated. Said it was the only thing he thought was officiated well. The game was officiated too soft. They played it like an early season game, and he thought that the players weren't doing anything after the play that should have been flagged. He thought most of them were pretty soft penalties. And so I think he's living on that line of I want my football team to be aggressive and physical. We've heard the word physical 1,000 times over the last couple of weeks while not wanting to see them get flagged. And so I wonder if he's kind of setting the tone for the future by saying, this is who we are, this is how we're going to play, don't flag us for it, or if it was legitimately flagged soft. And the one thing, Nnamdi Obiezar should not have gotten, or not Nnamdi, Abe Kamara should not have gotten flagged. That was a terrible flag, and I think there were a couple that were close to being that.
So I agree with that one because I went back and I think I posted a clip on Twitter of that one specifically where the receiver goes to the ground. It should be 3rd and 14 after the tackle is made. Receiver holds onto Kamara's arm, and then as Kamara pulls it away, he gets the 15-yard penalty. Very soft. Face mask penalty. That's a penalty every time.
Yeah, that's a penalty.
The late hit on a receiver, Richard Tony's hit on a receiver on the first 3rd and long, always going to be called a penalty. Yeah. So, yes, I can see where he's coming from to an extent, and I agree that there were some of those 50-50 calls where maybe a different officiating crew doesn't call them. But, like you mentioned, maybe a different officiating crew calls a couple PIs on JT Broughton where – they allowed him to play very physical. They allowed Stanford's DBs to be physical as well. We saw a couple opportunities downfield, maybe for Stanford to get hit with the PI. One pass to Jack Besh specifically comes to mind. But overall, I think that is really, truly kind of the fine line between being aggressive and being undisciplined. And first game of the year, you can expect, I think, a little bit of sloppiness. One of the things I appreciated from Sonny Dykes' comments early today was the fact that he said we focused a lot on that today was to stay disciplined and to clean some of that stuff up. So I think the shot at the officiating is something we've seen Sonny Dykes do in the past. He typically does not have a great relationship with the officials. As well documented at this point. But I appreciate the fact that he is backing up those comments with intentional work to eliminate some of the mistakes that we saw in week 1. Because the reality is if we see some of those same mistakes in week 5, week 8, week 12, then it becomes less of an officiating issue and more of a TCU issue.
It was nice to hear him say that they had a great practice on a Tuesday after a win, because that's normally what you hear after a loss. We had our best practice of the year. But even the players, said, hey, we had a great practice today. They are very anxious and antsy to get back out against LIU and to play at home. So, I think the perfect scenario as a coach is to win and have things to be mad at your team about. So Sonny basically got the perfect scenario on Friday night. You got to win. You had an opportunity to put Stanford away multiple times. Credit to Stanford for one, because they did not back down either. They had a lot that was not on film. Sonny immediately came in after the post-game press conference and said, we had never seen that defensive front look before. They surprised us. Credit to them. They were ready for us with something we hadn't seen, and they executed it really well. But then on the flip side of that too, you also, like you kind of alluded to earlier, I don't know that 2023 TCU football wins this game, right? In fact, they probably don't, because they showed that they wouldn't. And this team, you had the crazy turnover, the J.P. Richardson fumble. Sonny said today he really should have called a timeout before that play. He took ownership of that. You had opportunities where there were quick change moments, and the defense came back and stood tall nearly every single time. Disastrous first drive with the penalties, a couple other mental mistakes in that first half. But that third quarter, and then outside of it wasn't a meaningless touchdown in the final frame, but it was almost a meaningless touchdown in the final quarter. That defense locked Stanford down in that second half. They made the adjustments. They executed at a high level. Marcel Brooks got in there for a sack and a half. You saw Cooper McDonald living in the backfield. I thought Johnny Hodges had a really good game. And then the safeties and the corners, I think, played at or near a level that we could have hoped, right? Only that we could have hoped.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the preseason too. We saw the results of it on the field against Stanford. The secondary had a really good day, in part because the front had a really good day. Yeah. When you've got Cooper McDonald and Marcel Brooks and Devin Deal and Marcus Steele and Tymon Mitchell, have yourself a day, my guy. When you have that defensive front creating as much havoc as TCU's did, the secondary is going to have a pretty good day, because they're only having to cover for 2 or 3 seconds at a time before Ashton Daniels either bails out and runs, which he did do well to his credit. There were a couple design runs, like you mentioned, where TCU wasn't quite as gap sound as they needed to be, especially at that linebacker spot, that I think they're going to really get fixed. But, how many times did we see Daniels roll out and throw it to a covered receiver, and the throw was either off target or batted away by a TCU defender, or just, falling to the ground incomplete harmlessly because the coverage was there? It was a really, really good day for the defense overall. And the secondary, I think, had a day because they played well. And also, we saw the impact of what a quality and capable defensive front can do. For me, it felt vintage, almost. I know that Gary Patterson never blitzed quite as much as Andy Avalos did on Friday. He liked to rush 4, maybe send a 5th guy. Occasionally, we saw a lot of 5- and 6-man rushes against Stanford. I think there was an advantage that TCU saw there on film, especially with what you talked about as far as Stanford's offensive line goes. But it really just felt like TCU kind of almost got back to their roots a little bit, with a hard-hitting, fast-flying defense, multiple helmets to the ball as quickly as possible, guys in the backfield pretty consistently, and then an offense where, Josh Hoover threw for 353 yards, 2 receivers had over 100 yards for the first time since 2020 in a single game, and he did his best Quentin Johnson impression. Savion Williams, 17 targets, 11 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown. I thought it was a good day for the offense, especially passing the ball, to kind of complement what the defense did on Friday night.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of room for the offense to grow. I mean, I will say when I saw Josh's 353, I was surprised. It did not feel like he accumulated that many yards through the air. But then when you look at how he did it, it started to make a little bit more sense. You mentioned Savion. They force-fed him on that first drive. They really did the defense's attention to him, and they did it in really easy ways for Josh to complete passes, which I liked. It was a lot of short stuff. I mean, he had 17 targets and was not the leading receiver on the day. I mean, I think that tells you how they were using him.
Third in yards.
Yeah, third in yards. What he finished with, like 85 or something, I think.
85,
right? Yeah. So, but I thought it was really smart. Go to your guy that you know can make plays, that can do stuff with the ball after he catches it, get Josh Hoover some confidence, and then that really did open up things for Jack Besh. Playing out of position, but a position that he said today was very comfortable for him because that's what he played in high school, and he said he also really likes to learn how to play every position. He sees a play, he wants to know all of the roles for every wide receiver. But him stepping up and having that kind of game, I mean, it had to be such vindication for a kid who burst onto the scene as a freshman at LSU, and then dealt with injuries and just really couldn't get into a rotation. For him to come out and have that kind of game, we've been talking him up. I know you and I both just think the world of this young man and what a fun, great kid he is. So to see him play like that, I thought was really great. And Stanford had absolutely no answer for him because of his size, his speed, and his route running ability. The run game needs some work. I thought in the second half they did a really good job of getting Cam some room, some daylight. I thought he was stretching it out a little too far. Some of that was by design. Some of that was necessitated by some missed blocks and some different things. They seemed to clean it up in the second half. And what I loved about Cam Cook is he had the bulk of the carries, probably in a way that I was anticipating. I really thought Trey Sanders would get more opportunities, some of the other guys, but it was Cam's show. And despite the fact that he could not break free early, he kept running hard. And then when his opportunity did came, he had an unbelievable touchdown to really put the game away. Showed his athleticism, his burst, and his fearlessness when it comes to initiating contact and running through guys.
He did, and I think that part of what I noticed in the second half was that in the first half they were trying to run a lot behind the right side of the offensive line. In the second half they ran a lot behind the left side. Behind Colton Deary, behind Bless Harris, and Ben Taylor-Whitfield when he was in the game as well at left tackle. And they had more success. If you look back in that first half, I believe Cam Cook's yards per carry in the first half was roughly 2.7. He finished the game right at about 4 yards per carry. So a much better second half running the football. I think the line settled down once they started to recognize what the fronts were from Stanford because, like you mentioned, Sonny said on Tuesday, and I think he said it post-game too, is Stanford presented a completely different defense than what they had really prepared for. They had not totally prepared for what Stanford actually came out and ran defensively, and so it takes a little bit of time to adjust when you haven't seen what you're expecting to see. And so you could tell they made some halftime adjustments. They ran the ball more efficiently a little bit in the second half. That touchdown at the end of the game by Cam Cook where he kind of tumbles over a defender, really created his own way there. Some of the blocking broke down on that play. Was huge, put TCU up by 10 and really kind of put the game on ice at that point. And I liked what I saw from the kid. I think that he's earned, based on his fall camp and spring camp and now game one, the opportunity to really truly be the bell cow. You kind of know what you've got in Trey Sanders. You know what you've got in Dominique Johnson. Let this guy go out there and show you that he can be the workhorse you want him and need him to be. Is he going to continue to block on third downs? We'll see. The pass protection actually held up, I thought, pretty well for Josh Hoover most of the night, which is not something that we saw a lot in the fall. TCU's defensive front had a lot to do with that. But we'll see. I mean, I think it was a really good first game as the starter for Cam Cook. I think he grew up a lot in the middle of the game. Still got some questions about that offensive line, though, that I don't know exactly where down the line in the schedule we have those questions fully answered.
Well, I thought one of the interesting things that happened today during the press conference is our friend Steven Johnson over at the Star Telegram asked, or it might have been Jeremy, honestly can't remember if it's Jeremy or Steven. One of those two guys asked this question of Jack Besh of like, after going against the defense, how, and the question was, what did you think of their performance against somebody else? But you could tell by the way Jack reacted that the question he wanted asked was how much better did it feel to not go up against those guys, I think. Because just how physical and how aggressive. And you could see him kind of be like, and then like pause and be like, oh, listen to the question.
Have to
and
rewind
question.
it and keep going.
But you can tell, like, I mean, I think we might have something special in that defensive front, not just because it's unbelievably talented. This is not the most talented group in the country, but because of the depth and the ability to rotate, they were so fresh the whole game. And Sonny alluded to that on the offensive side of the ball too, which I thought was interesting because to me, a rotation on your O-line is not a good thing. He, I think, tried to spin it like it was. He talked about liking that he could get Remington Strickland into the game so that he could keep Colton Deary fresh. And he thought that would... I don't think that is sustainable for the rest of this season by any stretch of the imagination. I think that's his way of spinning that. I don't necessarily know how to get the 5 best guys on the field because I don't know who those 5 guys are yet. They should be able to continue to grow and build this weekend against LIU. UCF has some dudes on the front line, but their defense is not their strength. By the time you get into SMU, Kansas, etc., I think that you could be facing a real test. Thankfully, TCU's schedule is very heavily backloaded when it comes to the defensive front strength. So they've got a lot of work to do, but all in all, I did not think it was a terrible performance, and obviously it was effective enough to win. And I thought Josh did a really good job of getting the ball out of his hands quickly so that he didn't have to sit back there and hope and pray like we saw him do for a lot of fall camp.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that stood out about Josh on Friday night was his accuracy was really good. Mm-hmm. I think I can count on one hand the number of off-target passes he threw. One that Savion made a wild diving catch for like 3 yards. One to Beck on a little like 6-yard curl that was behind him. One pass behind Savion as well that he didn't catch. I think really truly those were the 3 that stand out. I think it was almost 40 attempts for Josh. So overall a really nice night passing the ball accurately. Also decision making wise, I thought he made pretty much every right decision that he could. There were a couple moments where it's like, ooh, he kind of wanted to let one rip. The corner route to Savion in the end zone where he was double covered. I don't know if Josh was just overthrowing him to get rid of the football there because there was a little bit of pressure on him if he was really trying to force that throw. But overall, I thought just a really intelligently played game from Josh Hoover. And I think that's one of the big reasons that TCU managed to come away with this one-score win. It's the first one-score win they had since 2022. 0-4 in one-score games last year, 4-1 in 2022. And so it was just nice to see them get back on the right side of that statistic to start the season. We talked about overcoming issues, and we haven't even talked about the fumbles yet. They fumbled the ball 3 times and lost them twice. That's something that they're going to have to clean up as well. But the fact that they kind of stacked all these mistakes on top of each other in week 1 and came away with a win is a signal, I think, of the mental fortitude of this team and the talent of this team to be able to overcome some of those things.
Yeah, I think this is a team that has a lot more fight than what we saw a year ago. They have a lot more trust in each other. I think they have a lot more unity to play together. That's something that Marcel Brooks talked about today as well. They seem to not be fazed by when the other side of the ball makes a mistake, and I think you could see the frustration on the sideline last year. One thing I want to ask you, because I was on the field the whole first half, so I think you can't get that above view, but it seemed like they were not giving Josh Hoover many opportunities to let the ball go down the field in the first half, and they took the governor off in the second half. Do you think that was by design of just letting him get comfortable, get to a groove, and then letting him let it loose, or was that with the way that Stanford was lining up defensively?
I think it was more the former than the latter. I think it had less to do, well, maybe it had a little bit to do with Stanford's defense just because they hadn't seen some of those fronts before from Stanford, and so I think the goal was not only just get the ball out quickly to get him in a rhythm, but get your receivers into a rhythm too. I mean, how much did it serve Savion to be that engaged on the first drive? 5 catches for like 45 yards and a touchdown right off the rip. I mean, that's going to get your number one guy fully engaged in the game. And when Savion's engaged, now you see what happens. J.P. Richardson ends up with over 100 yards receiving. Jack Besh has his first 100-yard receiving day as a collegiate receiver. And we're not even talking about guys that didn't play in Dalen Wright and JoJo Earl, who should be back this week. Eric McAllister was banged up. He only saw 3 snaps. Like everything that we saw from the passing game, first half, second half, I thought was well-designed, well-structured, maybe a little pedestrian at times, but if it's working, go with it. I don't see anything wrong with continuing to make passes 5, 6, 7 yards downfield if you've got guys that are big enough and strong enough like Savion Williams and Jack Besh to turn those into 15 and 16 and 17-yard gains. I mean, the touchdown drive to go ahead 27-24, you saw a little hook, or I guess I think it was a dig by Savion over the middle. He caught it like 8 yards downfield, made two guys miss, got an extra 9 yards. Then you had the 43-yard long pass to Jack Besh after that. And then all of a sudden you're staring a touchdown right in the face. And it's those little passes that set up the deep stuff. And so I think you're right. There was a little bit of gamesmanship there, first half to second half, but also, I think it was really, truly the right game plan for game one, regardless of what Stanford was doing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right too. It's always an interesting perspective. Taking photos, you see one aspect of the defense. When you're sitting above it or you're watching on TV, you get to see the whole picture. It's really hard to see how all 11 guys are lined up, and I haven't had a chance to go back and rewatch the game yet. So
yeah, it was cool. I thought Stanford did some things really, really well defensively, but really, truly, I thought that most of Stanford's opportunities came from TCU mistakes, whether it be the penalties on the first drive, J.P. Richardson's fumble that put them in really good territory, the fumble on the goal line that kept TCU from getting closer to the lead at halftime. Whatever it was, whatever Stanford's opportunities, it seemed to be generated from a TCU mistake, not necessarily a Stanford success, if that makes sense, outside of a couple really good Ashton Daniels runs and then Ilik Eomenor, I can never say his name right, but he turned it on a little bit in the fourth quarter and got the majority of his 100 yards came in the fourth quarter. I think he had like 30 going into the fourth or something like that. But, I think one of the things that really stood out to me from TCU in a positive light was the red zone offense. We lamented this red zone offense all last season. It was abysmal. It was like 120th in the country in efficiency. I think they were 124th or 25th in red zone turnovers last year. I think it was like 35% of their red zone visits ended in a turnover, which is just absolutely horrendous. They did have a red zone turnover on Friday night, but it was the only red zone opportunity that didn't end in a score, and it was one of only 2 of 6 red zone opportunities that didn't end in a touchdown. So there were some red zone issues early. The first touchdown drive that TCU had, they had -4 rushing yards in the red zone. They had the fumble, obviously, just talked about it. But those 2 red zone drives in the fourth quarter really stood out to me because at that point they had started to run the ball a little bit better. We saw a rushing touchdown from Cam Cook. And we saw, I thought, some really good play calling in the red zone as well with the routes that they were being asked to run. We saw that out route that Jack Besh scored on how many times in fall camp?
Yeah.
Were those receivers working on that exact route in one-on-ones with these corners? And the corners knew it was coming. And more often than not, the TCU receivers still won that battle. It's a great route. I love that Kendall Briles dialed that one up in the fourth quarter when they really needed a touchdown, not a field goal. And they called upon a guy who, like you mentioned already, Jack Besh is a great route runner. He's also very strong. And that is a deadly combination in the red zone. And so it was really good to see him get that call, for TCU to score a touchdown in that moment. I thought the red zone offense overall looked much better. Now, when you start to play better defenses, will it hold up? That's still the question. But for week one, I thought you can kind of check that box off. It has improved at this point.
Yeah, I definitely think we have reason to be positive about it. But like you said, I don't know that the whole book has been written in that regard. But definitely a little bit more creativity, a little bit more thoughtfulness in the red zone. And the execution was certainly better than what we saw a year ago. So it'll be interesting to see how that continues to develop, like you said, not just against better defenses, but on the flip side, as TCU continues to get opportunities to play live football and continue to work on their chemistry in that area of the field.
I fully agree. Hey, let's move on to something, though, that I know you wanted to talk about tonight, and it's because Marcel Brooks was made available during Tuesday media availability. He's not a guy that we've gotten to talk to a lot over the years. I thought he said some really fun things about why he's still at TCU that I know resonated with you. You posted a clip on socials earlier today. Just talk a little bit about Marcel. He obviously had a great game, sack and a half in the first game in this Andy Avalos defense, and it seems like from a maturity standpoint, from a talent standpoint, from a mentally fit standpoint, Marcel is really starting to finally put it all together.
Yeah, it was really cool to hear Sonny Dykes talk about him because you can tell this is a kid that everybody loves being around, right? His teammates love him, the coaching staff loves him, but Sonny really harped, maybe isn't the right word for it, but really talked about the maturity aspect. Being healthy was like number one, being healthy, but Marcel has really matured both on and off the field, and his understanding of the system, his understanding how to play together, to be part of a team. And I think that there's a humility that comes with having to sit on the sidelines for most of the last 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. And he used that opportunity instead of transferring or pouting or doing a lot of things that none of us would blame him for doing to get better, both mentally and physically. And listening to him talk about, I asked him, in this era, why did you stay? I mean, he could have left so many times. He was never promised a role. There was no guarantee of what his role would be coming into this year. And he kind of alluded to, a lot of people think that strength is when you do it on your own, but that he's really learned that his strength has come from doing it around the people at TCU and that have invested and cared for him. You can tell the confidence that players have in Andy Avalos and the confidence he instills in them, and you really heard it when Marcel was talking today. And for all we heard about Avalos coming into this season, I have been really, really excited about the way that the players talk about him, not just from being a great coach, but the way he's really mentoring them too. There seems to be a genuine love and care, and that was a big reason I think Marcel said that he stayed, was he met Andy Avalos and said, this guy can help me be great, and loves me, and said Sonny loves me, and the position coaches and the strength and conditioning staff, he said that those guys were there for him when he needed somebody, and so why would he leave when he's in a place that's basically family? And I thought that was, as a TCU alum, as somebody who loves this university, that's what you want to hear from the student athletes. Not that they got a lot of NIL money, or that they're play for a winning football program, or they want to do whatever else, but I'm here because I think we can be great, but also because I'm cared for, and I think that can get lost a lot of times in college football. So it's good to hear a kid like Marcel, who's certainly seen his share of adversity, feel like he's really valued both on and off the field at TCU.
Really cool story. It's kind of funny to listen to a transfer talk about loyalty, and but in the era of the portal, the fact that Marcel transferred and then didn't have a consistent role for 3 years and stuck it out. I mean, that is loyalty in modern college football, and proud of him for the way that he's grown up. Yeah, no, I mean, he played wide receiver for 1 year, for crying out loud. So props to him for growing up, for making the choices that he felt were the best for him based on not only himself but his community of people. Really excited. And then I think, tangentially related to that, the comments that he made about Andy Avalos and your observations, I thought, which were really astute, are a nice reminder that even grown-ups can still grow up a little bit, because we'll be honest, right? Andy Avalos did not come to TCU with the best reputation. His time at Boise State ended with him being fired, with some reports about not great relationships with players, and some of the things that were said and done there maybe aren't necessarily totally appropriate in this day and age. And the fact that he's gotten on campus here and has pretty much unanimous, has all of the players singing his praises, talking about his mentorship, talking about his leadership. Maybe this was a really good fresh start for Andy Avalos too, and he's learned a bit and grown up a little bit as well. So really cool to hear from Marcel, and I think that we can start to maybe put some pieces together about, just a reminder, you're never done growing, and I think that Andy Avalos is proving that this year as well. Another opportunity for the Horned Frogs this Saturday to prove that they are all growing up as a team and looking to progress to getting to 2-0 on the schedule, Melissa, as the vaunted FCS program, Long Island Sharks, come to town, coming off of back-to-back.
They gave Albany all they could handle.
Lost by less than a touchdown to the University of Albany. They're coming off 2 4-7 seasons, and that's pretty much the last I know about Long Island at this point. You were there. Sonny Dykes gave a nice, good rundown. I know they got a good running back. I know they got a good linebacker. Give me the 1-2s on what we can expect from Long Island this Saturday.
Here's the deal. Sonny Dykes said they pushed Albany as far as they could be pushed. He said that that LIU lost in a lot of the same way, or had a lot of the same issues TCU did. They kept shooting themselves in the foot, or they might have had pulled off the upset there. But he did mention a couple of players that he saw that stood out. He talked about their defensive front and how good it is. Said they're solid, they're dudes up there. Then he talked about the running back, and Sonny didn't mention the running back's name. And it's not until I looked at the roster as to why I learned that he didn't say the running back's name. Because the running back's name for LIU is Ludovic Choquette, which is a perfect backfield mate. Yep, perfect backfield mate for quarterback Luca Stanzani. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, I just want you to know I am getting my pinching fingers. This is the most Italian football team. I am so excited.
Are they coming to Fort Worth to play football or to make a pizza pie?
Oh my God. Don't clip the bad Italian accent. No, it's incredible. Ludovic Choquette. Like, I cannot wait to hear Brian Estridge pronounce that on the radio. It's going to be one of my highlights of the season. But look, Ludovic is rushed for 128 yards against a pretty good Albany team. He did that on only 15 carries, long of 44. This is a big boy. He is a beefy running back, but he has a little bit of breakaway speed. So the quarterback, Luca Stanzani, did not throw for a ton of yards. Decent completion percentage, but he did throw 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. He's going to take care of the football. And then this defense, again, I'm not going to sit there and try to talk, put us on upset alert here or anything like that, but I do think there'll be a level of respect that TCU has for this team. We saw them push Baylor around in the first half a little bit a year ago. I don't think that they'll have as much success against TCU, but Sonny Dykes was very complimentary of this team and was very happy to give them credit while also saying, my team is very, very ready to be at home and to not deal with a West Coast travel day and to not get home at 7:30 a.m. the next day after the game with no sleep. So I think we're going to see a great TCU performance, but you might be surprised that LIU, the Sharks, might be able to put a couple points on the board. That's going to be really fascinating to see.
Well, it's always hard to fight a hammerhead. You're not exactly at an advantage when you're in the water and they're swimming around. They got their fins and teeth and stuff. But I will say this. I do appreciate that Sonny Dykes has always, regardless of opponent, tried to get his teams to understand that when you step onto the football field, the one thing you have to do, to a certain extent, is take your opponent seriously. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't do that, bad things can happen and things can spiral quickly. Maybe we saw that on Saturday night when Texas Tech and Abilene Christian were playing. Oregon only beat Idaho by 10 points. Oregon's number 3 team in the country. That was at Autzen. Idaho gave them pretty much all they could handle for 3.5 quarters. If you don't respect your opponent, you're not going to prepare in a way that will allow you to win a football game the way you're supposed to win a football game. And the reality is that TCU should win this football game by a large margin. So I appreciate that approach from Sonny Dykes. And I like that there are some ballers on this team that are going to make TCU take them seriously. And like you said, this is an opportunity for TCU to come out and fix some of the mistakes from week 1. Make sure that they've got their P's and their I's dotted, their T's crossed for the start of conference play, which is a week later. And it's a good opportunity to get some guys back that maybe didn't play in week 1, especially some of those wide receivers who need some timing reps with quarterback 1 Josh Schuver in order to make sure that they're ready for conference play as well. So I think overall this is a really good opportunity for TCU to take things seriously and get some good work in.
And on that note, Sonny did say he expects Eric McAllister, Dalen Wright, and JoJo to all play this weekend to be ready to go. He also gave us an update on Haas Haney, who did not specify the injury that he suffered against Stanford, but did say he should be back in a couple of weeks, that he's already well ahead of where they expected him to be at this point. I didn't push it. I wanted to ask if that meant we could expect to see more Haas Haney packages down the line, because I think a lot of people were surprised to see him get as many snaps as he did in the situation that he did. So bummer that he got hurt, but it looks like TCU should be close to a full bore. He also said he expects Jordan Bailey to get more in the rotation at wide receiver as well. So we should see a lot of guys taking snaps at both inside and outside receiver on Saturday night. You hope that TCU is comfortably in the lead to where they can try a little bit of everything. And I really hope we get to see some Ken Seals too. I'd love to see a Ken Seals halfway through the third quarter to wrap things up and let him get some reps too.
It would be nice. That's obviously, that'd be a luxury to get your backup in, your actual backup in, to get him some live reps as well. Good thing about a guy like Ken Seals, he's got a lot of reps under his belt. He saw a lot of live fire in the SEC for a bunch of years, and you know what you're getting with a guy like him. So really, truly, this is an opportunity for TCU, like we've said, to just get out there and do everything right and check every box. Melissa, as we wrap up, though, let's do some quick hits from around the athletics department, because TCU has had a big week in athletics, not just on the football field, and I think some things are really worth noting here. First and foremost, TCU soccer got off the schneid after a disappointing loss up at Notre Dame. They've won their last 2 games against Central Michigan, a very, very late night affair against SMU that didn't really get going until midnight because of rain, that they won on an absolutely just stunning goal from Bella Diorio.
Yes, Diorio.
Free kick, bent
Beautiful.
it like crazy right around the wall, off the post and in. Wonderful shot to win 1-0 against SMU. Their next game is...
I am leading the Bella Diorio hype train. I am the captain of the ship. I am the one. Please, this kid has got something about her.
She's got juice.
She's got the juice. She is so fun, both on and off the field. Like, she's a great interview. She's an incredibly talented player, and she is just chaos unleashed every time she steps foot on the field. Big Bella Diorio fan. She is going to continue to be a superstar this year. 3
goals in her last 2 games. Obviously, there's a good reason to be a fan of her, if for no other reason than she's scoring goals. Mm-hmm. Kim Lancaster hasn't played the last 2 games. Do you have any insight onto what's going on there? Is she banged up a little bit? What's going on there?
We have not been given any injury information. Do not believe that it is injury related. Think there might be some other things going on there. That soccer program you thought Gary Patterson was buttoned up. Well, Eric Bell learned at his knee when it comes to information. So I'm continuing to push for information and continuing to kind of get pushed aside in that. So as far as we know, Cam it is not an injury issue, but that might also just be as far as we know. So expect that we will see her back on the field sooner rather than later. But that information is not yet available to us. So we're working towards that.
Next opportunity for Cam to rejoin the team is on She's with the team. Next opportunity for Cam to suit back up and start playing again is on Thursday when TCU travels to Texas A&M to play the Aggies. So we're going to keep on talking about TCU soccer here. Next up, volleyball has gotten off to a start in their season. They took down Oklahoma up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and then they fell in 4 sets to Nebraska, who played in the title game last year, ranked, I believe, number 2 in the country. Fantastic Nebraska team. TCU not only won a set, but probably should have come away with 2 sets because they were leading in that second set before kind of falling apart at the very end. Bounced back nicely to win the 3rd set and force a 4th before Nebraska really kind of turned it on and closed things out there. But overall, a really fun weekend by the Horned Frogs up in Nebraska. And the Huskers had not lost a set at home in several years, so that was a big deal. Now, I will say I just saw on social media that the Huskers traveled to SMU and got swept. So who knows what's going on? Apparently TCU broke them down. But they don't lose at home. They don't lose sets at home. This TCU volleyball program, you talk about having the juice. They absolutely have the juice. This is a really good squad. They are super athletic. They really attack the ball. I'm excited to get out and watch them here in the next couple weeks as well. Jason Williams has that program humming right now, and they're going to be a force, I think, in Big 12 and beyond. They head to Waco this week. They've got games against Minnesota and Wisconsin, so obviously you travel to Waco for that. And then also props to Melanie Parra. We have grown to really know and love her in her time here after transferring from Texas. She, once again, Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. Yeah. Got that award, so she's racking up awards. Incredible player. She can jump out of the dang building. Mm-hmm. It's so much fun to watch her play. Moving on, cross country swept their first match of the year. First place for the men and women at the John McKenzie Invitational here in Fort Worth. It was a really fun photo that we saw on socials. Mm-hmm. The men finished. It's for those who don't know, cross country is teams of 5. The men finished 1st through 5th in the men's heat, which is pretty cool. And I believe all of the women finished in the top 10. And TCU men and women won both spots, got first in both of those as well. So very cool from cross country. And then triathlon won their first competition of the year up in South Dakota. at the Southern Hills Triathlon in Spearfish, South Dakota. They finished 1 point ahead of Denver, and then South Dakota got third. Arizona was fourth. So
that's the first
pretty cool.
ever triathlon competition in TCU.
They
history,
had done
like
some
official.
they had done some stuff last year. I don't know if it was exhibition style. But yeah, this is the first, I think, true triathlon season, and they came in first place, came back with some hardware. So, pretty fun start to the the athletic year for TCU.
We're not
top
here to
to
play
bottom.
School.
I don't play school anymore. I've got plenty of paper up on my wall. I'm good. All right, Melissa, that's going to do it for this episode of the Frogs Insider Podcast presented by the Flying T Club. We will be back to recap the game against Long Island and talk about everything else that has happened in Horned Frog Country to that point. We'll be back on our normal schedule. Obviously, this podcast is coming a little bit later in the week than normal because of Labor Day, and Melissa had to go to Napa, and then I had to have a family get sick and everything. So just life's happening over here. But we'll be back on our normal schedule next week, posting on Monday morning and Thursday morning as we get you ready for Big 12 play, which kicks off in a week.
I'm very excited for my potential person that's going to preview UCF for me. So I haven't locked it up officially. So again, not going to detail the information, but if we score this one, I'm very fired up about it. So
absolutely,
if not,
I've
got a great backup plan too. So we're gonna have great UCF information for you. And let me tell you, those Citronaut fans are riding high right now. They think they've got something special, and that game is going to be insane.
Well, regardless of who your guess is, we'll never tell if it was your first choice or your backup. So everyone will just assume that you were super hyped about that guess. But yes, that's it. For Melissa, I'm Jamie Plunkett. We'll talk to you next time. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.